All right. What's up, everybody? Sorry about that. We haven't figured out why our sound isn't working on our intro in the past, like, 3 weeks now. So, I think I'm going to dig into that. Probably not tonight because it's always late nights, but later on. Anyways, we would like to welcome our friend from Fishing the DMV on tonight. We're very pumped to have him. And,
dude, I think it's going to be a really...
Since we got a little echo.
You know what? No, it was my phone. I was sharing the post. My phone was yelling at me. We should be good now. But yeah, so this is going to be a really informative episode. I'm really excited for this one. Adam's actually on, or not Adam, Thomas. We're talking about Adam in the comments. Thomas is on the line with us. We're going to bring him on in just a second. But I typed up a bunch of questions for him. This is going to be a little bit of a change of pace for us because we usually just kind of sometimes shoot the breeze. It's just me and Chad tonight, so we're going to lock in and answer some questions for you guys. So without further ado, Thomas should be on the screen now, right? We got him on?
Not yet.
Okay, so we're going to, like I said, I got a bunch of questions here. I'm going to pull them up on my phone right now, and then we're going to rock and roll and go with it. So... let us know if we still have an echo thing going on before we get rocking and rolling. But yeah, it's a Friday, so you know what that means. If you got one, pop one. Before we do get started, I do think we should make a little PSA first. This is Bass and Beer Radio, after all. We do drink beer on the show, but it's also important to remember when to put the beer down, right? And we have some friends that have been generous enough to help us out with the show. They are called Bel Air Recovery. If you or anyone that you know is having an issue, whether it's with beer, whether it's with drugs or anything, please give them a call. Don't throw your life away. Don't let your loved ones hurt themselves because... you know, things get out of hand, and it happens to a lot of people, so please keep that in mind. You know, we joke a lot about this show, we drink a lot of beer, but at the end of the day, it is an important thing. So make sure that you're looking out for each other, doing the right thing, and as they say, enjoy responsibly. So,
that being said, we're going to swap over to Mr. Thomas here.
All right, good deal. So this is the man, the myth, the legend. I'll give him an intro, short one. I'll let him do most of the talking because he's a lot smarter than us. But this is Thomas from Fishing the DMV. If you guys haven't seen his podcast, you really got to check it out. It's a super, super dialed in, informative podcast. I watch it all the time, and I just like to learn and hear the stuff that he talks about with some of his guests. So Thomas, man, the floor is yours. Go ahead, give the viewers a little bit of an intro of who you are, why you got started, and anything else you want to hit before we get into these questions.
Well, dude, first I want to say it's a fantastic intro to be like, this episode's been brought to you by Bud Light and the AA program. So, you know, once you have too many cores, you can head on over here to the AA. I like it. You're getting money from both ends.
You know, hey,
that's awesome.
Right. Yin and yang, man. Yin and yang.
Got to be responsible.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, it's so weird to actually be at this side of the camera. I'm so used to being on the other side, so this is actually fun for me. Yeah, so this thing started about 2 years ago, honestly, in November, and I think it was like November 28th of 2021, I think, was when I dropped the first episode. And like a year and a half before that, I was in my MBA program, and I was doing just kind of like digital marketing and stuff, and I was listening to the Redskins actually on the radio, and I just had this epiphany listening to like the 10th day in a row that they're bitching about the defense, and guess what? They suck. Spoilers. And I was like,
the Redskins?
You know
nah.
And there are the Redskins. Sorry, guys. If you're
we're going to get along great. This is already off to a great start. This is off to a great start. I'm looking forward to this one.
So basically, with that said, though, I was like, there's a lot of passionate people that will call in about how bad the defense is for the 10th time. Why don't we have something like that for fishing? And it's just specifically about our area. And then I pitched the idea to like some of my professors, and they're like, it's never going to work because no one cares about the region corporately. They only care about big stuff. And then he did some research where he's like, you know, unless you're talking to like the big pros and stuff like that, you're never going to get a lot of money. And I was like, I don't care about that. I don't care about the money necessarily. I just wanted to kind of just show off the fisheries here and give those people a platform. Because when I grew up, I lived in Loudoun County, and the Shenandoah River was basically in my backyard. And I got to witness all those fish kills, and it was terrible.
We've had a number of those here in the Gunpowder. It's brutal, dude. Yeah, know exactly what you're talking about.
And a lot of people don't care if they're not in that circle. And that's what really bothered me is they didn't have a voice and we could bring everyone together. And so that's kind of when the idea of like fishing the DMV, and it's not just about the fisheries too, you know. I mean, for people that don't know, DMV is, you know, DC, Maryland, Virginia. It's kind of the lingo. If you live here, you know. If you know, you know.
Right.
It stands for not just the fishery, but the people that live in this area. We are some of the most commuter anglers on the planet. I was blessed in college to fish collegiately. And when we go down the Carolinas, and they would say like, so how far did you have to travel for your tournaments? I'm like, well, I live in Western Loudoun. So if I have to go to Kerr or Smith or the Upper Bay, it's 3 to 4 hours. And they look at you stone faced like, wow, I have to drive like 20 minutes to go to all my lakes. And it's like,
it's unbelievable.
People they can't comprehend how much we commute in traffic with a boat. I mean, if you're launching to go to Mattawoman,
like I am tomorrow,
Baltimore, yeah,
it's 2 hours.
Don't appreciate.
Yeah,
it's insane. Well, and plus the Key Bridge ripped to that, so that's
right.
Things worse too.
God, I didn't even factor that into my
snap.
commute tomorrow. Oh my God, damn it. Oh well, we'll see what happens.
So yeah, and then basically, you know, way leads on to way, and Fishing the DMV was kind of born.
That's awesome.
And that's kind of the story of the podcast and how that got started. Fishing wise, I mean, I fished in high school with the Marshall Bassmasters and the Orange County Bassmasters. From there, I played baseball in college before I had a couple of shoulder surgeries. And then I started my own college club at Shenandoah University. And we got, I think we went to the Nationals twice. It was 2015 and 2016 for the old FLW before MLF bought it.
That's what I fished. So I started the club at VMI, and we fished there.
Dope.
Yeah, so that was right, and I think a year or two after I graduated is when FLW went away. But we used to do the Kentucky Lake trip. We did. They always had one on Smith Mountain, and then one year they had one on the Upper Bay in the summer, so we got to fish that one. We got 11th place in the Upper Bay when the top 10 go, so that was fun on my home water. Yeah.
I spent too much time on title. I spent so much because all the regionals were always title based, which was weird. And so it's either the Potomac or Upper Potomac. And honestly, I just got kind of burnt out on fishing that stuff. And I started to like go out of my comfort zone and fish more of the Carolina lakes and stuff, just to kind of, because I never wanted to become like the river rat, so to speak.
Right.
I know, no disrespect to those anglers, there's some great sticks that you will never beat. But I wanted to be a little bit more versatile.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of those guys around here, and like you said, it's no shit on them, but it's winning every tournament on the Upper Bay is great, but can you win when you go to Smith Mountain or Lake Anna or the Eastern Shore of Maryland? I mean, it's like the versatility is, in my opinion, I'm the same way. I try to strive to be as versatile as I can, which was a very sobering reminder at Lake Anna when you're looking for fish and not going to a spot where they are. So, but we'll get into some of these questions. And I'm going to go out of order. I hope that's okay. The first one that I have to talk about, because we've talked about this in the past. So, are you on the Maryland Black Bass Committee, or are you on the Virginia Black Bass Committee?
So, how much time we got?
Right.
Virginia doesn't have a board, sadly.
Okay.
And so I'm just fortunate enough that I know so many of the guys in the biology department in there that I have an inside edge, so I can get a little bit more information. But they don't have the ability to have a board. Maryland's got this right, where they do have a couple of boards set up.
Right.
A lot of them for like the Chesapeake Bay specifically, that you can have a governing body of people to kind of get an inside peek of what's coming down the pike. And so, yeah, I'm part of the American Black Bass Association.
Okay, cool. So with Maryland, and I'm not trying to start nothing, because a lot of guys that watch this are on the committee. A good friend of ours, Scott Sewell, I believe is on the committee as well. But
he just got the
he got
highest,
that huge award too.
What is the award?
We got to talk about that. I'll look that up when we get a second. But basically, what a lot of guys in our area talk about, is the Black Bass Committee is a bunch of old guys that sit around in some secret meeting and they determine what we're going to do with stocking. And it's like, okay. And then, so as an angler, like our Eastern Shore rivers, which I'm sure maybe you fished them, like Chop Tank, Nanticoke, Pocomoke, they set up similar to the Chickahominy and the James, probably more so the Chick. It's big tidal swings, heavy current, lots of pads, lots of vegetation. But for us, the fishing over there, for the most part, just sucks. There's been a huge push to do F1 stocking. And our Black Bass Committee is just like, we will never do it. And I don't get it. Like, I don't understand why, because if you're not fishing the nation stuff, if you're not traveling over there for a very specific tournament, like no big tournaments go out of the Eastern Shore anymore. Like nobody. Like you might have one nation tournament over there a year because the fishing sucks. Like there's no reason to go. So I don't understand why they won't do it. I'm hoping maybe you can give us some insight on why that might not be a good idea. Because F1 stocking, like Virginia, is a huge success story. At least it seems to me with F1 stocking in Anna, obviously the Chickahominy, Chick Lake, Smith Mountain. I mean, these places have exploded with big fish. So, you think it? I mean, they say it's too cold, but I'm like, it's 2 hours away to go to Anna. I mean, is it really that much of a difference?
That is, when you have politics involved with things, it makes it such a complex answer. And I know I'll probably get shit for what I say with some of the guys on the board, but these are my thoughts, everyone, if you're listening, not the board's. And I've been fortunate enough, I got to talk to the head of the departments of the Maryland Wildlife Resource, Joe Love, and I've gotten to talk to some of the guys and the head of the Department of Virginia, Odin Kirk, and so many of others. A lot of it comes down to first is just money. And I think you don't understand how small Maryland is comparatively to Virginia. Or
Right.
I've had this in my comment section. Why don't we do what Texas does? It's like Texas is the size of Europe.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Yeah, I'm just telling the truth there. Like they are bigger and they have more money to spend. And we can get into their program too, I guess, because that kind of makes sense. Is Toyota, the vehicle company, threw a shit ton of money at them in the 90s and early 2000s for their program. A ton of money. That helped them out tremendously. And then they partnered with, of course, Bath, the Toyota, Big Bass Fest and things of that ilk. So that's part one is that with just money. Does Maryland have the same money that Texas or Virginia does?
Of course not.
No, they don't. So let's look at that. Number two is like the bang for their buck. What's interesting with F1s, and I'm just going to go from the Maryland perspective first, and then I think I'll go from Virginia's perspective, and then people can make up their own minds. With Maryland, if you're looking at the F1 based on how it's been told to me, you only get that growth from that generation, that first generation. So it's kind of a hollow victory that you're throwing that money and you'll just have that one generation of fish that they will get big, but their genetics may or may not actually transfer over.
Okay, interesting.
Because of that, if you're Maryland, you're thinking we have a limited budget. We could probably pop off one generation, but then you probably have to do continuous supplemental stocking. That's one mindset when it comes to F1s. So if you have a little bit more money, that would kind of make sense to do something like that. Now let's also put into where we're doing this. The Bay is so interesting to me, and this actually came up at our last meeting in January too, about doing different studies at different parts of the Bay. Because of saltwater intrusion, if you have a tournament that, let's say, goes out of the Northeast River, if you go all the way down to the Sassafras, my perspective, there's no way in hell that fish is ever going back to the Sassafras.
I agree completely.
He's never coming back.
And there's a lot of people that will disagree, but I agree with you 100%.
Well, I brought this up at the meeting. Is Nanjemoy on the Potomac is a great example of this. Back in the early 2000s, Nanjemoy, there was a stocking program in Nanjemoy, and there were evening tournaments going out of Nanjemoy that got that place to be extremely hot. Skeet Reese wins down there. A couple of other big tournaments went down at Nanjemoy. Then all of a sudden, you haven't heard from Nanjemoy again. Why? The stocking program stopped. The night tournaments there no longer are happening out of that boat ramp in the back of Nanjemoy. And then everyone that fished that place because it was hot, because a professional went out of there, pulled all the fish out of there.
Right.
And they never went back. What that tells me is we have a historical data point to say, like, the saltwater intrusion there fluctuates so much that once fish get pulled out, they're not really going to make the journey all the way back there from, let's say, Mattawoman or Lisavania. If you are doing the Chesapeake Bay, I could see a money thing. It's like, okay, so let's say it'll probably be about $100,000, let's just roughly say, to stock fish in a part of the Eastern Shore. Great. Let's say then you have a tournament that doesn't go out of there. You go there because somebody wins out of that area. Let's say call it Area X. And then after a year of you pulling fish out of there, that place is dead again.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. Yeah, wow, that's crazy. I never even thought of that, dude. That's wild.
What I suggested is they need more boat ramps. Like, so there's a really, really nice marina that was rebuilt. I think it was from the Maryland Bass. Again, these guys in the comment section could probably fill me in a little bit better on this part too. I think it's in Gunpowder, if I'm not mistaken. It's a really nice boat ramp there in Gunpowder.
Yeah. Well, there's Dundee Creek and then Mariner Point Port.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dundee is really, really. I know exactly where you're going with this, but I'm gonna, dude. I live on Dundee. Like my house is on it.
Real quick, we got a lot of people on here. We got Gromster in here, Andre's here, Zach's here,
Larry Craighead,
Phil's in the house, Larry Craighead,
and Matt Downs.
Headwaters, Jim Fallon, Dan is always here. What's up, Dan? And Matt says, "What's up, guys? Love to see you guys link up. Tom is the man. He's a smart dude. I get those vibes.
I like need a notepad or something because this is crazy." So I know where you're going with this Dundee thing, but go right ahead because this almost okay. So like the SQTs in Maryland used to be a lot bigger than they are. Like used to be like 100 boat tournament from what I've been told. That was before my time. I didn't start tournament fishing until like 2018. But now, dude, I mean like a full SQT is like 30 boats. That's a full one. So anyway, go ahead.
Cycle boat ramps. I mean, I think if you really want to see a change in just the population shift on the Chesapeake, I think step one is, let's say a millionaire puts in a banging ramp in the Sassafras. I'm just going to use that example. And then you have Dundee and you have, the East up there and you rotate how many tournaments are there. That would actually help start leveling out the bass population in different creeks. And I think that is kind of the best way to deal with tidal water that has saltwater intrusion it's a variable you can't control.
Right.
Versus Lake Anna, and we can get to the Virginia program too. If you dump so many fish in Lake Anna, at least logically you can say like they're still there. Even though you might move them from one creek to another, they can still move around the lake.
Right.
Versus Middle River. That place one with Aaron Martin had 2 fish kills. A lot of those fish, there's no way in hell they're going to get back from going all the way up to the bowl and back. Like it just ain't happening.
100%. I mean, I think
Virginia
we see that. I think we see that in the Gunpowder itself. I mean, like we launched in Joppatown, and like some guys would run over to Dundee and bring. Like I was one of them, bring fish back. I don't think that fish is ever going back to Dundee ever.
No, and I think there was a study.
Dundee to Joppa's not that far.
Well, so here's a question for you. We have tournaments every now and then out of Dundee, and guys will go up in the Susquehanna and they'll catch bags of smallmouth, and then they bring them all the way back to the Gunpowder in Dundee Creek, and they let the smallmouth go. We've asked this on the show. Nobody has an answer. Where do those fish go, in your opinion?
Heaven. They probably don't do too well when that water gets hot. And that's the thing too is this is where, and guys, again, for people that are listening, I am not a biologist. I get to listen to smart people, so they get more nitty on my show about this stuff, but smallmouth cannot handle salinity like largemouth can. They're very rugged fish. So I think when it gets hot and you have a real dry spell, like last year we had a big drought, and I just know for the Potomac, there was a dude that I think caught a stingray up near Pohick, which
that's crazy.
Would be insanely fun to set the hook on that when you flip, into like some spatter dock. That would be shocking. But if you have that saltwater intrusion, it's going to actually kill a lot of them, I would assume, because smallmouth don't get that far down past the Woodrow Wilson Bridge on the Potomac. So going to Dundee, no.
Yeah, so it's funny because a lot of people were upset when Bass Nation started launching tournaments in Dundee again because it's a run, and it's like the Potomac. The bay can get really nasty really quickly with any sort of wind, so people were having issues with it. But those rivers, those southern bay rivers, have been getting a little bit better with a lot of 100% due to Scott Sewell's stocking program, particularly the Gunpowder, because we had a bad fish kill.
After those bad fish kills, it's become a lot better. But, and I love what is going on with the stocking program and everything, but is there a point where you're stocking... I'm not saying what we're doing is wrong whatsoever. That's not what I'm trying to say. But is there ever a point where dumping 1.5 pounders into the body of water becomes an issue?
It depends on the body of water, and we should always. And this is something that I kind of learned a long time ago. What we're talking about is supplemental stocking. There is no way you could stock the bay. That is like pouring water into an ocean, literally. You can't. But you can supplementally stock areas. And you saw this with I don't think anybody knows about this, but this is dropping on Monday, is the Maryland had a smallmouth stocking program that just got canceled. It's done. They're done with it because of budgeting. 5 years. It's one of the most successful smallmouth stocking programs in the United States of America. And it's done because they're declaring it a success, which it kind of was, but for money, they got to stop it.
Where was it?
Well, that was the Upper Potomac.
Really? Interesting.
Yep, from Algonquian Park, which is the Virginia side, all the way up through Harper's Ferry and Paw Paw, that kind of section there.
Wow, interesting.
Very successful. You actually have a chance right now of catching, if you're a kayak tournament, you could catch all fish that are over 20 inches long. Very easy to catch a 4 to 5, even a 6-pound smallmouth now right in your backyard. It's starting to rival the Susquehanna when it comes to size. 100% because of the stocking program. But I guess my point with saying that is the Upper Potomac, let's look at the size of that. Now let's look at the size of the Chesapeake too. Cool. Is it possible? Yes. We built the Great Wall Channel. We put a man in the moon. How much is it going to cost?
Right. Yeah.
And this is the thing I think I figured out about government that sucks is they're not willing to tell you the truth, that it's like, guys, it's expensive as hell. What I do like about Maryland, though, is they're like, but you can do it. And there's a lot of states where they won't let private people stock fish. Maryland, at least they're like, it will show us what you're going to do and we'll let private people do it. So that is actually kind of a bonus because there's a lot of states that don't let you even do that.
Interesting. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that at all.
No.
I mean, all things up until the last 20 seconds, all things in Maryland bass stocking is Scott Sewell. Like everything. So, I mean, like, I had no idea that you could do that. I mean, that's pretty awesome. Now, you were getting, before we got off track, you were talking about the Virginia program. What else did you have for that?
And I think the Virginia program, just to give everyone listening to Tale of Two Halves, is, back in I think it was the early 90s, the 2000s, there was a push to do some kind of stocking for the James River. And this is really like the big impetus, I think, on how the F1s popped off as this almost like this miracle fish. There was a big push by private anglers to like, hey, let's do something to help our fisheries. And the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources were kind of like, we don't know about this. We don't know about this. And I think it was called the Concerned Bass Anglers of Virginia. They had a group, it was a private group, and they're like, how about this? We will raise all the money. You just make sure that, we're not throwing any diseased fish in there. You check everything that we're going to do, but we will throw money at this problem. Could we try this? And Virginia was like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. And so they were able to raise a boatload of money. We're talking about 6 figures plus to put F1s in there. What ended up happening is after doing this for a couple of years, you eventually did get the effect of having one generation of F1s that actually got to maturity, and you started to see 6-7 pounders getting caught out of the James. Then this is the fun part of the story. It started to make headlines because bass went there.
Right.
And people saw the 6 pounders. And then if you're a government, you're like, shit.
Now we can make money.
What are we going to do? So then they started to pick it up. And then you saw really in like 2019, they started to stock Lake Anna. They started to stock Smith. Was it successful? It was successful. You can just base it on the weights that you're seeing out of the James. But the amount of money they had to throw at the problem to make it happen, that's where I think people need to understand is the asterisk. Lake Anna, it probably costs over $100,000 to stock Lake Anna. And they can only stock a portion of Lake Anna to get this going. So the issue, I guess I'm going to say is like, so yes, is it a success? 100%. We can show the James is the classic example of that. I think what anglers need to figure out, and this is my question with being on the board, is a freshwater fishing license, when you buy that, that gets absorbed into everything that's freshwater. If you buy a trout stamp, that goes straight just to trout restocking. And I think that is the break in the system, is if you fish a bass tournament, your dollar counts to bass fishing just as much as it counts to muskie fishing, cat fishing, everything. If you do trout, you have to buy the stamp. That automatically is in its own separate pool to help restock trout. That's just to where I think maybe there could be some change where how do we allocate money specifically just for bass fishermen? Because I've heard this on, a couple of people I've talked to, they can always wheel off the stats for trout guys, but they can't necessarily for bass guys. They can do that because they have the data point of these are how many people that bought a trout stamp. Therefore, we can allocate funds. Bass fishing is a lot harder to do that for because it just gets thrown into this massive pot. And I hate to always like point out obvious problems without a solution, but if there was a way that we could do something to say like, yeah, these are how many people spend on bass fishing specifically. Now let's throw more money in it. That might be kind of the way to go.
That's really interesting. That's actually, yeah, that's a really good point because you're absolutely right. Like and it's like duck hunting's the same way. Like you have to get all these stamps and you have to get all this crap, and it's like everyone's like, God, it sucks.
So there's no way to track what people are targeting the most.
Well, that and the only way that anyone's targeting or is tracking any catch rates in Maryland is when tournament directors actually report their tournaments. I mean, that's
right.
Assuming you pulled a permit in the first place, which half people don't. I mean, for whatever reason.
Because it's a pain in the ass.
It is a pain, and there's a lot of stuff you have to do. But yeah, wow, dude, that's a lot of good shit because I did not realize. It's like you're right. It's so simple. The trout stamp, duh. And then I personally, if you asked me to pay $5 a year for a bass stamp, even if it was 15, I would do it. If I know that money is going to bass fishing, I would absolutely do that. There's not even a question. And the other Adam has an interesting comment too.
I guess I mean obviously if you're on a bass boat with a bunch of bass fishing rods or something, you know, you can obviously assume that. But say you buy a bass stamp, you're a bass fisherman. You're not fishing rockfish, perch, like any of the above. Say you get a bass stamp, like how do they check you for that though? You know what I mean?
So
I mean, copy paste what they do with the trout stamp, but the problem is now you're adding another legislation law because if you don't have a trout stamp, you're trout fishing, you get busted. So that would probably not go over well with the general public. You know, but
right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. I think about that a lot because again, Texas guys, if you're just tuning in, they have a golden egg where everyone I've talked to, Odenkirk, Joe Love, Maryland, Virginia, if they could do it, you do Texas. Texas has so much money, they throw it at people like Mr. Beast. If you catch a 10-pounder, they take it back and they just breed the genetics. This is genes 101. You breed the big bucks to get bigger bucks. And they have the money to like literally like bring in a helicopter, pick you and the fish up. You get a fake one and some money, and then we're going to go breed this thing. That's the best program. But they probably are spending like the GDP of a small African country to do that. So,
right. Yeah. You're right. 100%.
Yeah. So, but then with that said, I think the positive from this and what I've learned is if we know how much it costs, we can work towards a goal. And so if it does cost $100,000 to restock gunpowder, cool, then us as fishermen just need to get together and just raise the damn money ourselves and not rely on the government to do it for us.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point, man. It really is. Like I'm in my head already. I'm thinking like, man, this could be like, what if we did like a bull roast once a quarter, or like every 6 months, and you just your charge to get in the door was $15, and all that went to here, Scott, go stock the gunpowder with F1s. Like, I don't know.
I'd pay for it.
I would. Like, I think a lot of people, because I think what we're getting at is what he's saying is when you give the power to the people, to the anglers, to say, hey, this is your baby, go make it happen.
Anyways.
What you mean well, okay, yeah. Well, it's a lot more than that. Like
yeah, right. I know.
You're not just gonna go to 7-Eleven and get an F1, but you can get hot dog water apparently, which is disgusting.
It's it's easier said than done.
I wish Scott was able to be here tonight because that would be.
I reached out to Scott.
Oh.
He's got things going on. It's good. It's a Good Friday.
Yeah, true. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, man, like wow, here. You're right. Somebody just needs to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Who's in? Like it's that simple, but it's not that simple, but it is, which is cool. Yeah, the Texas program is insane. I mean, just to hear the stories about it's ridiculous. So one of the questions I had on there was it's weird. We kind of don't talk about it a lot on the show, mainly because we all love him. Paul is like a big live scope advocate. Do you see in your like studies and the people you talk to, does forward facing sonar affect the populations of bass when it comes to pressure? How are these fish responding to basically having nowhere to hide, or less places to hide? Yeah, there was always that one old man that could go find them offshore or whatever, but now it's even easier. So, how do you think these fish are responding to that?
It depends. And I think this is the issue with social media and the lovely thing that it is, even though I do kind of make my living doing it, it's the devil. It creates this echo chamber, and it depends on the species. It depends on the lake. It depends on the pressure because it's cyclical. You see this if you go up north to like Lake Champlain. There are techniques you can use up there consistently to catch fish you can't anywhere else because it's frozen for like 9 months out of the year. They don't see a bait.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you get up there as soon as it thaws out, it's like, oh, this is the best place ever. And then by the end of the year, they get conditioned to it. If you're going to a lake that doesn't really have the pressure, those fish will kind of fluctuate. You can catch them again and again. So why am I saying that? If you go to Lake Fork during one of these events and they've had the cancer ray hit at them with 200 boats for 5 days straight, yeah, it's going to affect them there because they're not stupid. They're creatures. It's like deer hunting. Like it's no different. Like they are creatures that understand that. If it's a lake that has like mild pressure, I think like Occoquan Reservoir is an example of that. It's not going to affect them as quickly. When we're talking about, and that's such an interesting Pandora's box, is like, is it going to create a different fishery in 10 to 15 years once everyone has it? Oh, 100% it will. Like, because these are smart animals that have to adapt to survive. And they feel so much with their lateral line. I mean, you can tell with throwing a big spinnerbait with a Colorado blade and how they react to it. And you're hitting them, again, they're hitting them with a big old cancer ray, and they're going to learn real quick what that means. And I see that right now when I'm fishing smallmouth on like the Upper Potomac at Big Slack. A bigger fish is going to get conditioned when it gets closer to it. It can hear the clicking, it can feel something, and it will shy away. The smaller, simple jack ones that are only like 12 inches, they're not as conditioned about it. So will it affect the fish? 100%, but that's fishing. And that's where I think it's interesting with all these people is I think generically they just don't want to learn anymore. They want to tie on the whopper plopper and that's it. And they will be like, listen, I caught them in the whopper plopper during World War I. I don't know why I need to change. And it's like, well, there's your problem. You got to adapt.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because like it's such the debate on forward facing sonar has gotten so intense in the last really like 3 months. I mean, since the Elite started, we have had Matt Herron on the show twice now, and he's one of those guys that's more and more vocal about. I'm not a fan of. I don't want to quote him, but he's not as supportive of forward facing sonar as a lot of people. You might think, being an Elite Series angler, my forward facing sonar is the best. He's not that guy, which is kind of, I respect it. But and then you got some guys that are like, either hey, adapt or get left behind. So it's a very interesting.
I'm not for it. I'm not against it. I think there needs to be limitations. I think dudes rolling around with 5 transducers on their boat and 16 freaking sonar screens. It's just a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I also 110% believe that it is allowing people to come in and be competitive simply because of electronics and not because they understand fish patterns. And, I mean, that's factual.
I think that's the biggest gripe with a lot of the older guys on the Elite Series now is it took them 30, 40, 50 years to get to the level that they are at fishing, and now somebody can come in who's
now they have
21.
to learn electronics better than
kids that grew up playing video games.
Younger kids and stuff like that. I'm sure there's a little bit of obviously a challenge there, but at the same time, they could also be able to use their knowledge of fish patterns to find those fish faster. So, I mean, there's an argument to be said.
You just said it there, and this is, I think, it comes down when you boil away all the BS. Do any of you guys run LiveScope?
I have it. Paul has it as well. Yep.
All right, let's use an example. All right, you pull up to Lake X, Loch Raven, whatever, like Lake X. You pull up to a point. How long do you stay there?
With LiveScope, not very long at all.
Why?
If I don't see him, I move on.
So what you're saying is your ability to make decisions and adapt has drastically decreased, and you have a quicker time to make decisions.
Correct.
As you get older, a lot of people lack the ability, or they don't want to quickly make decision changes. What LiveScope enables you to do in general is it's not just you just put a jig on top of someone's face. It gives you instant variable data on what you should do next. If you don't want to make those types of decisions, or your brain doesn't want to operate at that speed, you're not going to be successful, because what you want to do is hit those same 5 points. But now you can be like, this point has shit on it. I need to make an adjustment now.
Right.
And it allows you to make 1,000 little adjustments until you hit the gold. If you're one of these older guys, they're like, well, I had to build this instinct. It's like, no, you're now being ignorant. You want to just do that bad decision a little bit longer, which you're allowed to, but you're going to fail because you don't have that ability to make that quicker change if necessary. And so is it that you can see the fish? Yes. But I've had so many instances where I just know there's bait in the area now. I know they're not reacting to my lure the way they should be.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for sure. 100%.
Exactly. It's not the hunch of like, I just keep throwing this old crankbait, eventually they'll hit. And after 6 hours, oh, they don't want it. Now it's like 3 casts, I need to make a change.
Yeah.
But you see so much more of the field now pulled out offshore, fishing offshore, compared to where everybody used to believe the fish were being onshore. And I can't remember exactly what angler said it, but somebody said they've only been fishing for 30% of the bass the whole time. And I understand it, but you know what I'm saying? At the same time now, this has given people the opportunity to go find bass offshore. Not like it's a new concept. It's happened forever. It's just a different technique now.
Yeah, and I think the issue, and this is, and people don't kind of like facts and logic when it comes to this stuff, sadly, but I think it was 2005 is when side scan became a thing, and Elton Jones won. Mm-hmm. It has now been 19 years with it. Facebook was invented in 2004, 2005. Social media was not a thing when we had the last technology boom in fishing. We didn't have Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook where it is now, where we have these giant echo chambers. And the issue I have with the conversation now is not that, is it different? Is there a problem? Yes. Is the yelling and echo chambers as bad as it was back then? It's hard to tell because social media has ramped everything up so much that it's hard to distinguish how much of this is real and how much of it is fake. And again, I just have to go back to, there was a lot of consternation when side scan became a thing, and Steve Kennedy, Elton Jones, like these guys that were early adopters started to rake the field, and people thought it was a load of crap. But you didn't have Twitter to go on. You didn't have the echo chambers to go on to. And again, is that taking away from, do I think, my thoughts on the scope in general? No, but I think it always has to be a caveat of the salt, like how much of this is real and how much of it is actually fake due to social media. And that's, I don't know, like that to me is always something I think about, because if you're trying to get on YouTube, guys, or Facebook, understand that hate clicks is a thing and it drives the algorithm. If you
Randy Blockett's a really good example.
Yep. 100%. If you put a sad dog on there, you're going to get a lot of clicks. If you say something happy, no one gives a shit. Yep. They just don't. It's sad. And so when people bitch about side scope or live scope or whatever, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think it makes it worse. Now, getting back to your original question about more people going offshore and stuff like that. Yeah. Like we're just discovering this stuff. Like I was reading an article today, like Steve Kennedy said, like, I didn't know all this stuff was on this point until I had side scan and I saw it. We're learning that there's fish offshore. There's a shit ton offshore that we couldn't catch before. And this is only like 5 to 6 years old. I'm really trying to pull off the top of my brain when Lowrance came out with their improved version to compete with Garmin. But I think that's only like 5 or 6 years old. And side scan is 19 years old. We're not complaining about side scan anymore. How many years until this becomes the norm? Because I still think we're in that teething period where you have so many anglers that are bulking it. And on my show, I made the example of the steroid era in baseball. I have a huge background in baseball, so this is kind of where my analogies always go. In the early years of the steroid era, there was a massive difference between the people that didn't take them and the people that did. The Mark McGuires, the stuff like
Yes.
that. And you could tell these
Bonds,
people were just,
Sosa. Right. Oh, yeah.
dude, his head grew
Conseco.
3 sizes.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the back end of the steroid era, almost everyone was juicing. And
Yep.
all of a sudden, everyone looked kind of the same. Right now, we're in the early era of the live scope where the early adopters are making everyone else look stupid. But once that lower half gets purged out and everyone has adopted it, it's not going to look as bad.
So
And
do
I
you think Bass is ever going to limit it or just say, hey, we're done with this stuff?
So that's a fantastic question.
I've heard rumors of insurance having issues with some of the sonar screens that people have on their boats and stuff.
Oh, you mean like because you can't see what's going on?
Well, you got like 4
Yeah.
screens in front of you going 80 miles an hour across the water, and they're looking at that as
a risk.
a risk.
Every sport needs limitations. 100% every sport. Baseball, there's a reason they don't use triple wall bats in the major league. Someone's head would literally explode.
Correct.
NASCAR, best example for bass fishing. Those cars have limitations. Every sport needs limitations. This is where bass and FLW failed back in the day because they're the older grassroots compared to MLF. They should have been intelligent enough to be when side scan came out. We need to start thinking about capping stuff. The Bassmaster Classic used to have like everyone gets the same boat, same amount of tackle. They need to put the genie back into the bottle. Do I think it needs to be completely outlawed? No. Do I think there needs to be limitations on how much money you spend or graphs? 100%. It shouldn't cost you the GDP of a small country to be a professional bass fisherman.
Oh, yeah.
Icon-
it's unbelievable.
Dude, Icon came out with a $150,000 bass boat. And my comment section killed me for that video. It's like, well, that's not the only boat. It's like, you missed the point of corporations. Somebody just broke that glass wall. And now Nitro might come out with 160.
Right.
And then Ranger comes out with a 200. And that's not including electronics. The bubble's going to pop.
Right.
It's going to pop. It's going to collapse. The last big collapse was during the housing, I think, crash of 2008, I think, when the bass fishing industry had to reset. We are really driving really hard towards that cliff because people can't sell boats anymore. They can't turn them over. And I think that's what they're going to use as the scapegoat to put in the limits is when everything bottoms out, they can then be like, because we care about people's pockets, we're going to do blank.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Like Paul, so usually it's me, Chad, then Paul and Rob. So we're all kind of on different playing fields with boats. Chad has a John boat and aluminum Ranger. I run a 2000 Ranger 518 VX. I just got an older 21 XDC Bullet that I'm flipping and making it basically brand new because bass boats are so damn expensive.
My John boat's nicer than my Ranger.
Paul just got a brand new Skeeter, and then Rob is rebuilding an old Tracker. So we're kind of all over the place with boats, but that's my thing too, is like I just can't justify where boat prices have gone. Like before COVID, I graduated from VMI in 2020. I told myself, I'm like, okay, I'm going to 1 year out of graduation. This is going to be my gift to myself for graduating from college and doing all this, that, and the other. And then COVID happened, and a year after COVID, the price of every boat was up 20,000. Like it was unbelievable for less stuff. You got less stuff than you did in COVID. I mean, like I remember the old Z20 because I used to price them out in class. I was bored. The Z20 Pro with the 250 with, I think it came with 10s or maybe a 12 and 10, like a 12 at the helm and 10 at the console, was like out the door after taxes, like 60, 62, 63 grand. Now, dude, like that boat's easily 10 to 15, maybe $20,000 more. I think the Icon is like almost insulting personally. Like how the $150,000 boat is just, it's insane to me. Like I don't understand how people even entertain it personally.
And I think there's context. I think what's great about long form is you can kind of get both sides to it so everyone can like look at it. Back during COVID and through it, the components to everything went up in price. And so, this pin here, if the components for this pin were $1 and I could sell this thing for $2. What happened with a lot of companies because of the bottleneck in supply chains is now all these components cost $2, so I have to sell it for $3.
Right.
Well, guess what? Now all of a sudden the bottleneck gets lifted, everything's cheaper. I still paid this amount for this pin. And so if I drop the prices anymore, I lost money, a lot of money, depending on how much stuff I have in back inventory. And so it really grabbed a lot of companies by the balls when it's like, I'm going to build a boat, and now if I lower the prices anymore, we go bankrupt. We got to keep pushing this thing higher and higher and higher. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then interest rates were 0. So it was like free money. And we're all paying for those sins from government standpoint. And I don't know if this is going to end pretty, but we need to kind of reset everything. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I'm a huge gambler fan. I always wanted one. I was really excited when they came back in business, and then obviously they're done. But I really was considering a gambler, and then I seen the price and I was like, it's just no way. I really think that was part of the reason why they went under. But we're actually going to talk to Andy Hauser from Team Marine in 2 weeks.
Oh, cool.
So hopefully he's able to give us some more juice on that. But yeah, I'm totally on your wavelength with it, and I like the comparison that you made to the steroid era in baseball, because it's interesting, because in a lot of ways the steroid era saved baseball, but I think forward-facing sonar is doing the opposite, because there's such a divide of people. I don't follow professional fishing mainly because of where we fish. A lot of it's not applicable. Like, it doesn't do me any good to watch people throw drop shots on the Great Lakes, because I'm throwing a chatterbait and grass 99% of the time anyway. But a lot of people now, they're just like, watching fishing is boring to them because it's the same. Everyone's throwing a jig head minnow, but a lot of it's the echo chamber too. But I mean, there's some truth to it. Like, a lot of guys are throwing in Demiki rigs, or throwing strolling rigs now. It's hard I think we all probably agree that it was a lot more fun watching Takahiro Omori catch 3 fish in 5 minutes to win the classic on a crankbait instead of a jig head minnow.
Then this is not LiveScope's fault. It's the tournament director's fault. Why are you going to Lake Fork in February?
Yeah.
Go to Florida. I know people want to say, well, Scott Martin used yes, but he was an exception. A ton of people at those opens on Okeechobee and stuff were not using scope because it's Florida. Go to the 3 rivers if you want a grinder. Go to the Sabine. You can formulate a schedule that really does limit the scope. John Cox, for God's sakes, I think it was a tackle warehouse. It was a tackle warehouse event, or at West Point, I think it was. He was doing extremely well, just buzzing the bank. And that's why I feel like there are remedies you could do, but they won't.
I agree.
Question: Why? Why? Because they like the noise. They don't.
Like you said, hate clicks.
It's hate clicks. They like people talking about fishing. It's fishing industry is so far behind the YouTube stuff. If you go to any other sphere of the YouTube world, they were doing this kind of fighting internally 4 or 5 years ago, because it drove hate clicks. I mean, look at Logan Paul, all that stuff. Fishing now is all of a sudden mature enough. They're like, hey, we could do all this hate click driving, and it's a thing, and it's weird.
Yeah. Now, do you think the sponsors have anything to do with the scheduling of the tournaments? You think there's somebody shaking hands behind the doors that say, hey, Garmin is really a big sponsor. I'll just say Garmin because they're the obvious one. We want you to go to Lake Fork in February.
There is not a lot of money in the fishing industry. And I think this is kind of the thing that people don't want to admit. You have, after the housing crash, and then ESPN, got dumped professionally, the Bassmasters, there was a lot less just easy money around. I mean, it really was. ESPN threw so much freaking money at the Bassmasters. And then they got bought up by the private group, which there's no problem there, but it does not have the same level of flex as it does when ESPN and the whole Disney Corp is behind you. Then you realize, okay, what are we going to do for money? Well, how do we go to the lakes? We can't just go to random lakes anymore because we don't have ESPN to help foot the bill. Well, we need a crowd. Where we're going to go? We need the states now to pay us. So St. Lawrence River, we're going to go there for the next 250 years because they're going to pay us to go there. And then, like you said, Garmin, do they have the money to help supplement this? They do. And the reason I bring that up is I don't think people understand just to have context of every situation. You want to ban scope. That's fine. But did you think about step 2, 3, and 4, which is, okay, you just told Garmin to get out. Congratulations. Their money goes too. I think that's why it's such a delicate situation that, cool, you just kicked out all the electronics companies, but now you no longer have professional fishing.
Yeah.
So, right. And that's where I think it's so delicate and nuanced, but people don't want to have that harder conversation. It's like the welfare issue in the country. We don't want to talk about it, so let's just look at the clouds and scream.
Right. Yeah, pretty much.
See, Thomas, question number 7 here. 90% of anglers hate seeing bass harvested. Is it necessary for a healthier population of bass to grow larger bass?
It's a 2-part question there, because I think it's also a cultural thing. Back in the early 80s, sharks were basically hunted to the brink of extinction, and then Shark Week happened, and now if you get mauled by a shark, all of a sudden it's your fault, because they've done such a great job at marketing, hey, this is what you have to do. Forrest Wood did an amazing thing when he said, like, what if, here's a crazy idea, we put them back in the water. And ever since he thought that and had that idea, he has done the most insane campaign to preserve fishing. And now it's like swayed from one end of the spectrum all the way to the other one, where you might as well put a Black Lives Matter sticker right on your forehead if you kill a bass. It's like insane. But most of the state records were all caught in the 70s. Why? Why is it Maryland, Virginia, Georgia, all these places, all the state records were back in the 70s and early 80s? I hypothesized the reason it is because conservation now is better than ever. States work so hard to make the best fisheries possible. You can pump out, like Virginia right now has a couple of reservoirs that could easily, you're going to catch 30 pounds for your best 5. It's insane, but no monsters.
What are those? Because I need a trip like that.
We'll bring them up. I'll definitely, I'll drop the goods there in a minute. But what was my thought? Oh yeah. So my thought was, and this is my hypothetical there, I think culling is definitely necessary. The big 3 things you need to grow legitimate bass, first and foremost. You need forage, you need habitat, and you need the genetics. Period of end of story. If you look at California compared to Texas, in the early go-ahead of California, when they started to hit their boom, they had good genetics put into the fishery, and they had great trout and kokanee stockings that are still going on to an extent. And again, I don't know all about the California stuff. This is just basically what I've read. But then it kind of just dipped off. Why? I think part of it is 100%. It has to do with probably a little bit of harvesting issues. They're not stocking largemouth, the good genetics anymore. And I don't think the habitat there is what it used to be. You can have saltwater intrusion. California goes through so many high droughts and stuff. There's so many issues there. But then you look at the good lakes, like the ones that really just kick out these absolutely giant smallmouth in the Dakotas. What's happening there? They're not touched. You have good genetics, you have a ton of forage and trout, and you have absolutely good water conditions right now. You have the holy grail. But then you look at the harvesting things, it's a little bit different there. And so I do think harvesting bass will help you get to that absolute threshold. But you need the first 3 in the Holy Trinity. If you don't have good genetics, insane bait, and great habitat, it doesn't matter if you harvest. If you have these 3 things, you have got to harvest some of the smaller. And this is deer culling 101. If you want to have an absolute insane buck, you got to make sure that he doesn't have a lot of competition. You've got to cull out some of the smaller ones. And if you have one that's 10 points that you want to get bigger, keep him alive so he breeds and make sure he doesn't have competition. Like, that is husbandry 101. But before you get to that point, I'll reiterate this again, does he have food? Does he have good habitat? And is his genetics good? If you got those 3, keep him around and then make sure he has no competition and you'll be fine.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So a slight side note, I fished Deep Creek a lot. When I was in high school, me and my buddy, we used to kayak fish it. I usually get up there once or twice a year and fish out of the Ranger. Why? So I think this is more a genetics thing, but why are the smallmouth there just small? Like, you just don't usually see, but you'll catch a ton of them. You'll catch 100 of them in a day. The largemouth are big. a lot of big ones, but the smallmouth they're like a 3-pound smallmouth up there. That's a big fish. Like that lake sets up so much more like a smallmouth. Like why don't we see those big ones? Do you think it's genetics or do you think it's a harvesting issue?
It could be possibly genetics and forage too. If you look at the perfection that we put up on the mountain is the St. Lawrence River. It was invasive species that made it that good.
Oh yeah, with the gobies, right?
You had gobies and then you had zebra mussels. World, you throw those things in your water, it'll turn it into Evian. It'll turn it into gin clear water. And so you took a sight predator, you put in a little retarded fish that lays on the bottom saying, eat me. And then you made him have 30 feet of visibility and he could just eat and eat and eat. And he had no real competition predator wise. When you look at Deep Creek, and again, not the biologist there. So if you guys would like to, you could go email like Matt Sell, who runs Deep Creek, and he could have more on you there. I think what you could have there is a genetic issue and maybe a forage issue. And if you had more forage for the fish that are there, they could get bigger. Again, what type of forage? It's the forage that the smallmouth would actually partake in. Largemouth are gonna like love those docks and those grass, whereas smallmouth generally that's not their deal. They're gonna be more pelagic out on the edges. Then you also have the pike thing, you know.
And the pickerel thing too, yeah.
And the pickerel, but the pike in particularly. This is a testament also to the DWR though. It is now the #1 southern pike fishery in the United States. It is the farthest south pike fishery where you legitimately could catch a record, like a massive one. And when you put it into comparison, like it is as far south as you can go. Like you don't have to go to the Canadian watershed to actually catch a big pike. That's kind of cool. But then you realize you got pike, you got walleye, and this thing is basically 6,000, 5,000 acres.
It's a bathtub.
It's kind of,
yeah.
It's a bathtub. And so, yeah, you've got a lot of competition in there that is going to make it a little bit harder for the smallmouth to compete. So there are variable factors there compared to Occoquan Reservoir, which I've talked about in the show, where it is a place you can catch 30 pounds for 5. It's just largemouth and a shit ton of bait. That's it. There's no striper. And so they can just eat and eat and eat, and they're not competing with anything.
That's an electric reservoir as well, right?
It's weird. It's a 9.9. Probably, and I'll probably get swatted for this by all the schools. I think it's because there's so many rich high schools and colleges that use that thing for rowing, and I think money was switched hands and stuff to where it's going to be 9.9 because between like Monday and Friday, the amount of rowers out there is just stupid. It's insane. But the club record was broken 2 weeks ago. I have this screenshot right here. Hold on. It was, drum roll please, for 6 fish, 35.6 pounds. 29.95 was second place. And then last week it was 3 bags over 30 pounds for 6 fish, with 5 fish over 6 pounds caught.
Wow. How big is that lake? Is it like as big as Deep Creek or is it a little smaller?
2,000 acres almost, if I'm not mistaken.
So it's more comparable to like a Loch Raven or something then?
Correct, yeah.
Interesting.
And again, like that place wasn't touched. Like the biologists never stocked that place. They never culled or anything. It just was, I think, and I'd have to like, don't quote me on this, but it was per cubic acre there's like 200 pounds of shad per acre. If you go there with your scope and you turn it on, you can't see very far. There's so much bait. It's stupid how much bait is in there. You can smell shad almost when you go down to the water. There's so many in that thing.
Wow.
We have an area kind of like that.
Yeah, I've been watching your show. I've heard you mention that a couple times, and it's a lake where it's like, you know, you drive into Lake Ann, it's like, oh yeah, there's the Occoquan River, there's a lake up there. Nobody really thinks about fishing it. I know the electric only part's kind of a pain in the ass, but we all have John boats for the most part, so that would be an interesting place to go. It's kind of on my list, honestly. It's like a fun destination to go. Maybe after a tough tournament, I'll go there and feel good. Like,
there's so many lakes like that in Virginia, and there's a lot, there's sneaky places like that in Maryland too, where Sandy Reservoir in Charlottesville,
heard
Hunting
about that
Run,
one. Mm-hmm.
Mooney. Sandy allegedly has had a 40-pound bag out of that thing too. There's so many of those like micro-sized lakes that people overlook because bass fishermen nowadays kind of suck where unless there's big tournaments, you don't want to go fishing. But if you're willing just to go try to catch a mega bag, there's lakes around you can do it, but you just can't do it in a tournament.
Right. What about Dalfit, close to Moomaw? I've heard 10-pounders come out of that place.
They definitely can. You're talking about Mooney or Moomaw?
So it's close to Moomaw. It's on the way. It's Dalfit or Do That State Park or whatever.
Yes.
I never fished it, but we used to pass it on the way to Moomaw all the time. Moomaw, I love. Moomaw is, in my opinion, it definitely before COVID was absolutely one of the best inland smallmouth lakes you could fish. I think according to some of the locals there, I actually go down there once a year and fish it. And all the locals that I stay in touch with, they're like, yeah, COVID like torched this lake because everybody was on the lake all the time.
Yeah, and I have a friend. A huge shout out to Phil and McCluskey are going down there tomorrow to actually fish at Moomaw for a tournament. Those are trout lakes. Anytime you throw trout into the mix, you have a chance of catching a donkey. I mean, it is the most expensive protein shake you can feed a bass. And if you really want to have fun, it's just get the most beautiful trout resemblant bait. And when your local DWR agent starts stocking waters, go there with a big Huddleston or a glide bait, and it's insane. HUD. Dude, you will smoke a monster. And I'll go to ponds here too in the fall when they start stocking trout. They know. Those bass in those little ponds, they know when they drop trout. It's like it's dinner time. It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I've heard of Sandy River. I've heard of obviously I've heard of Occoquan. But yeah, you're kind of right. I mean, and that's kind of what my point I was making about the Eastern Shore is like, I love fishing the Eastern Shore. It's beautiful. Like it's cool. There's cypress trees. It looks like you're fishing in Louisiana or something. But like to go like the biggest bag I heard of that came off that entire side of the state, not including the sassafras, was I think 16 pounds on the Nanticoke at a team tournament for the whole year. That's another interesting point you brought up about the sassafras, how that's a place where fish are pulled from all the time, not put back. There's never tournaments out of the sassafras unless it's like a 6-7 boat deal. But everybody, I mean, not everybody, but there are some people that will religiously run to the sassafras and pull fish out all the time.
There's another area we know of that people will religiously run to and pull fish out of all the time.
Yes. Yep.
Actually, just about every single tournament that launches out of our area, people go there and take fish.
Yep.
But it keeps pumping out
Middle
fish.
River. Let's use Middle River as an example. Let's say you guys won the lottery and you threw a 150 boat tournament and everyone caught a limit times 5. If you had a 150 boat tournament that launched out of Middle River, they would bring back 750 keeper-sized largemouth and dump them right there. You just stocked Middle River.
Right.
That to me is like the most doable thing to where if you put a boat ramp in, and again, the sassafras, something like that, you had 250 boat tournaments. That's over 1,400 keeper-sized largemouth that are just been implanted back there. It's restocked. I think that's the most financially way to do it, and then do some supplemental stocking to make sure the gene pool's good. But the Eastern Shore, put in a decent sized ramp, and then force a tournament out of there, a charity tournament. That it's literally just to just repopulate this area.
Right. Well, I think the issue with the shore is a lot of guys, maybe like on the Sass or something like that, but like if you put a tournament out of the chop tank, unless you're talking like your chance of winning 10 grand or more, nobody's running to the flats. I mean, if anything, you're just going to run to another Eastern Shore river. Like on the Nanticoke, a lot of guys will run to the Wacomico. That's why, like, if I had the budget of a small country, I would do my F1 stocking on the Eastern Shore to get people to go there, because I don't think a lot of people would take those fish. Now, I will say, when the Opens came here in 2021, there were absolutely guys that practiced that ran from the Northeast down to the Nanticoke, which blows my mind, like how you even did that. So there were guys that went and looked, and they were, all they did was burn gas and beat up their boat going all the way down there.
Well, and that's what I'd be afraid of for you. If you had the money of a small country, you got to stock those things, and they were pretty. Bass comes there, or big tournaments come there, and they're going to take your fish away. You know what I mean? Like, that's the issue, is, again, because Nanjamoine did this. They did that back in the early 2000s. A guy stocked it. They had those tournaments. They worked so hard to build it up. When they stopped, it just takes a couple of big tournaments, and all it takes is
They're gone.
Iaconelli wins out of the Eastern Shore, and people are like, oh, that's awesome. We're going to start running down there too. And then, yeah, it just takes 2 years, and all the big ones are out of there. So, yes, you could do it, but long term, there has to be that one extra step, I think. So it's like continuously good. And I don't know. The snakehead fishing's good, though.
That's a good transition if you wanted to ask him number 8. Because
I almost feel like maybe it's just because I had like a total bum year last year in fishing. But did you feel like the size that where we fish, the GP has become progressively more popular and more popular. There's more boats out there running all the time. There's more boats running there for tournaments all the time.
Well, and a lot of it was because of the Open. I mean, out of the top 10, I think 4 or 5 guys in the top 10 from the Bass Open were fishing the Gunpowder. Now, they were locals because the Gunpowder fishes better in September than any other place on the bay, and everyone that's local knows that. So, but last spring, a lot of guys in the Chester County Opens were running down to the pond, taking fish all the way back up. Fish that Scott's been stocking for 20 years.
I feel like there's the numbers of the. I mean, they're still there, but I feel like the numbers of like the 5s and the 6s are just not what they used to be.
Yeah, the lunkers in the so we have a Thursday night series that runs out of Joppatown. We fish it pretty religiously, and it's gotten pretty big. They're like 30 boat tournaments is not uncommon, which is I think it's good because the Gunpowder is a small place anyway. The fish, I mean, for a fish to go from the ramp to a hotbed area, it's like maybe 2 or 3 miles. It's not far, but the thing of it is damn, I just totally lost my train of thought. What were we saying?
Fishing the Gunpowder.
Oh, yeah. I definitely think that the number of big fish this year was lower. There was not a lot of 5, 6. We didn't see a 6-pounder all year. Not in the Thursday nighters.
It's a summertime grind. I get it. Fall and spring, you have heavier fish. But, like, you mean to tell me that the only time we can catch a 6-pounder for the most part is in the fall or the spring once they've been eaten up or they're full of eggs?
So I don't know. And then I think, but I will say,
Duarte caught a 7 out there.
Yeah,
one time
I think that
I don't know where, but it was out there.
Even though we saw less giants, the average was a lot better. Like I remember when I first started fishing the Thursday nighters, if you came in with 8 pounds, you probably winning. Like I can't tell you how many times I weighed in almost 9 or 10 pounds last year and did not win.
Cashed a check.
Right, like you're 9.5 pounds with the 3 fish limit on a river that sucked. Sucked is probably not a fair description, but has not been great for a long time, and you're not winning, or you might be 3rd or 4th place. So a lot of that goes to Scott, who has done a great job stocking the place. But so here's my question for you before we get into the snakeheads with tidal water. How much do you think these fish move in tidal? Because some people were like, if you catch a fish in the Northeast and you bring it back to Dundee, it's going back to Northeast. And I'm like, whatever you're smoking, I want some, because that is not the case.
Well, yeah, I mean, that comes down to like basic freaking biology. They're not saltwater fish. And again, if you have a tournament in the spring, and again, so if you have a year that's extremely dry, and for people at home, the less it rains fresh water into a saltwater system, the more salt water you have in the system, they can't go as far. So if you're going from sassafras all the way to East or Gunpowder, you still have a bay, an ocean there in between them. And depending on the salinity, they're not making that trip. Even if you put a dam across the bay in a perfect world, it's all freshwater, largemouth are generically more lazy than smallmouth. They did the studies. Again, I would suggest the audience go Google like Lake Champlain, like fish movement studies. Smallmouth will get out. They're going to go find their school that's roaming in 30 feet of water. Largemouth is like, this is a nice log. I'm just going to sit here. I'm done for a while. This is why, if you look at this is why so many people I think hate Japanese anglers. They just go off the boat ramp that the tour is like going off of. It's like, I'm just going to sit here in this pocket and cash a check because you keep bringing fish in here.
Yep.
We know this at Nutbush on Kerr. It's a whole freshwater system. Why is Nutbush always good? How many tournaments dump fish in Nutbush?
My best spot on the Potomac is about 300 yards from Mattawoman. I'm not ashamed to say it either. Mainly because every time I go down there, I can't leave Mattawoman because it's blowing 100 mile an hour. But you're absolutely right. Oh, there's a grass bed right by the dock. I bet there's fish here. Oh, yep, there's one right there. Like it, is it? Do some people think it's shitty? Yeah, sure. But if you got nowhere to go, Gerald Swindle said it on the bay. If you got nowhere to go, don't go anywhere at all.
Exactly. And the other thing too is like people, because I've had this debate a lot of times, is compare and contrast the Chesapeake with the Potomac. Look at the weights. I just pulled up the April 29, 2023 Chesapeake Bay tournament with BFL. It drops to 10 pounds by 14th place. You're at 10 pounds for a BFL. And then it's getting into a lot of ones. One fish, one fish, one fish. A tournament the exact same time in the Potomac, those weights are they're just so much better.
Yeah.
So now my question is why? Because neither of those places are supplementally stocked. It's just natural, home brewed what they have. It has to be habitat. There's better habitat for some reason on the Potomac right now than the Chesapeake, generically speaking. And I think it has to go to either hardcover, freshwater, or the hydrilla and the SAV that's there. That gives those fish a place to go. The bowl is great, really up at the top. If you guys haven't been to Chesapeake and you're listening, like it's basically you got all the rivers dumping at the top. It looks like a big ass bowl, and if they have
flats.
great hydrilla, the flats. It's a great place, but then it's just
which has been hurt with the grass recently.
Yeah, and it gets pounded. I mean, and like if you guys have never fished the flats, I'm sure you've experienced it. It's nothing for 50, 100 boats to be sitting in a park. We call it a flotilla for a reason. Yeah. In the flats, just everybody. One guy catches them on a white chatterbait. You're going to see white chatterbaits for the next 20 minutes until somebody catches one on a frog, and then everyone's going to start doing it. It's horrible. I hate it. I truly cannot stand it.
I would really like to know if somebody has a laser measuring kit, how big is the bowl, the flats, compared to like Belmont Bay? Because I feel like it's not as big of an area as we think. And it's probably close to the size of all of Belmont Bay.
Yeah.
So take that into consideration, that if hypothetically the flats is a little bit bigger than Belmont is just one creek out of 1,000 that have fish on the Potomac, which basically means there's just not as much habitat for a population compared to the Potomac. Therefore, if my mind's working, how do we make the habitat better? I think it's going to have to be SAV, but that's a silver bullet where if you could figure out how to make SAV grow, you'd be a millionaire, and then get the state to be okay with hydrilla.
Right. Did you want to ask him question 8 about the snakeheads? Because I think that's a good one too. That we speculate a lot on the show, but we don't actually have anyone that's well versed in the research.
So this question is even one of them things where like I'm kind of just like, But a lot of talk in this area suggests that stabilization of the snakehead population has been leading to bigger bass. It used to be see a fry ball, throw a frog on it, and catch a snakehead. Now it seems we catch more bass feeding on snakehead fry. What are your thoughts on this? Before you go off on this and talk about it, bow fishing has been the answer for the snakehead population. The bow fishermen have been taking care of the snakehead, therefore giving bass more opportunity to feed on snakehead fry. But I feel like I haven't seen that. I feel like I haven't seen the bigger bass be caught since the snakehead. Are you talking about like out on the flats, or you're seeing like bigger bags out on?
I honestly I think it's more of the gunpowder, and so like the perfect example.
That's where I disagree though.
Is remember when we went out last year and they were how many bass did I catch off of fry balls? I didn't even catch one snakehead off a fry ball, but I caught bass off of it. Like the bass are starting to learn, like you said, to eat small snakeheads. Like
yes.
So I feel like at this point it's more of an abundance of bait because in a river that we're going to isolate for the sake of the discussion, the gunpowder. The bow fishermen are killing the big ones. So between the bow fishermen killing the big ones, the birds eating the medium-sized ones, which probably isn't a super huge impact. But all these little ones that used to have mom and dad guarding the fry ball, mom and dad just got shot in, Kyle Barney's boat. So, who's taking care of the little snakeheads? I think the bass and stripers obviously too, but I really think that's part of it. It seems like the fishing in the gunpowder, which was a hotbed for snakeheads, really improved drastically.
The snake is if we're like going to talk about snake, the snakehead have dramatically fallen off.
Correct.
Dramatically, and everything with that has to do with them being smoked by a bow fisherman.
I agree. I think
now, and the thing is too that I will say is when we seen snakehead fishing or bow fishing heavy in the GP 2 years ago, very heavy. The past 2 years, I only see like maybe 1 or 2 boats because they've gone in there. There's still a lot of snakehead. Don't get me wrong. But it's not the same numbers that it used to be because they've wiped a lot of it out.
It used to be like a 3-to-1 ratio. You could catch like 3 snakeheads to 1 bass. Now, like I caught 1 snakehead in the gunpowder last year. 1 all year.
Same.
Like it's kind of cool because I'm not a huge fan of them.
But I already caught 1 8-pound snakehead this year, so
nice.
So that is such a fascinating topic that we could probably spend all night on. And spoilers to the audience. In 10 years, snakehead will be protected. There'll be a limit on them. Like, give a $10 bet. They're going to be some kind of stamp or something.
That is because everybody's complaining about them, and it is a money fish. It has nothing to do with the fish itself. It's about the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's money to be made because people want to catch them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like if you had to pick what is worse for the estuary, blue cats or snakeheads?
Blue cats. 100%.
Oh yeah, blue cats, 100%, 100%. No argument.
Yeah, they're just absolutely like a pig bomb. Like snakeheads have been proven with so many studies. Odenkirk, you definitely need to get on the show because he ran the snakehead task force for the United States, and he said like they don't eat bass. Like I have gutted thousands of them in studies, and I've never found a bass larvae. But beyond that, the fact is people want to catch them, and capitalism wins. The bow fishermen right now are making money off snakehead.
Yep.
They will logically get to the point they're like, if we kill all of them, we make no money. The government will realize if we sell a snakehead stamp, we make money. Eventually, those two synapses in people's brains higher up, that'll click, and there will be some kind of stamp eventually because there are so many people. I think we talked about Oliver. Like he even came here to catch a snake. Everyone wants to catch a snake. For God's sake, a big one's called a dragon. That is something.
It's cool.
Yeah. And I'm just saying like for whether it's right or wrong, like this is what's going to happen. They will be protected. They're part of the ecosystem. When it comes to will the snakehead population affect bass and I think you mentioned like I used to catch 3-to-1 bass and now it's different. Does that mean we're catching more bass? Does it mean you're catching more bass, or is it just because the number of snakehead have gone down, I'm now assuming I'm catching more bass? Is it causation versus correlation? That's a tricky one. That really is a tricky one, and I think it comes down to also like habitat, forage. They're opportunistic as hell. Largemouth are so smart in how they'll adapt to their food, and you see this with the shad run on the James or the Potomac. When that thing goes in full force, dude, you can throw, and I'll piss off a lot of people here, you throw a big glide bait or a mag draft on the Chesapeake, the Potomac, or the James, when the shad spawn's going on, the shad is going, they're going to kill it because they know in their brains when the shads start moving, that's an easy prey item. Those snakehead balls, they don't have mama and daddy there, they're going to pounce. Is it enough to where there's so many balls of snakehead fry left unattended that fish are automatically going to jump on it? Maybe. Or what I think it is, the bigger ones that are smart now know to key in on the bait, so they're around it. Now you can catch it, and now you assume the reason that there's a big fish here is because it fed the bait. The big fish was always there, it just wouldn't eat what you want, and now it's available for you to catch because it's hunting this bait. It's what happened with live scope and glide baits and stuff. These big fish were there, we just didn't know how to catch them until this happened.
Right. So what's the so I guess like the snakeheads haven't really taken root in Virginia like they have here, especially like in Lake Ann or nothing like that. But for a while, especially in the gunpowder, it was ridiculous. There were people.
It was crazy, man. For two seasons, I didn't want to throw any of my expensive like Mega Bass or JDM shit because it was just, dude, they were getting ruined by big snakes. So like all the stuff that I bought for bass could not handle snakeheads, and the snakeheads were eating everything that the bass ate. And the numbers were 3-1 in the snakes, which have now reversed itself.
Or more. Yeah.
Yeah, or more. But it's just like, I don't know. I'm a big swim bait guy. I like throwing 6 and 7 inch glides. I like throwing 6 and 7 inch paddle tails. And I will say, the snakeheads still love chewing on those things.
They're aggressive as hell, and tidal water is so perfect for them, where you've got a lot of shallow backwater areas that they can hide. They don't like deep, clear lakes. If they had their druthers, they can live there. Lake Anna does have them. Occoquan does have them. Rappahannock is probably going to be the next premier snakehead fishery because they got in there later. If I'm not mistaken, pulling back from my brain the Odenkirk conversation, it really was like Chesapeake first, and then the Potomac were the ground zeros, and it's spread that way. So because the Rappahannock is kind of newish,
is it shallow?
It's shallow. The tidal Rappahannock is just kind of like the Potomac River, tons of spatter duckfields and all that. But the key is this: the Rappahannock is where the Chesapeake Bay used to be 6 years ago, because they're still going on that uptick. So I think you're going to catch the next either world or state record is probably going to come out of the Rap, because it's just newer. It's still going up, and it's not getting hunted as hard as the poor Chesapeake and the Potomac have. If you like chasing snakes, it's interesting like how that fish has migrated so much. And to me, from as a person that gets to interview people, what is fascinating to me is how the public got so hated on that, when the blue cat has done more to devastate largemouth and our fisheries than anyone else, and no one cares about that from an outside perspective.
There's no focus on catfish fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be that.
There's no focus on catfish fishing. There's nothing there. It's a dead. I don't know. Nobody does that.
Yeah, pretty much.
I made the analogy, like the blue cats are kind of like if you ever watched a documentary called Pig Bomb, where one catfish can breed so many times in a year compared to a snake. It can the biomass is insane. I had on Dr. Moore of the Chesapeake Bay Association, the Virginia side, and he said like the amount of biomass in like the James and the Chesapeake of just catfish is like 20 to 30% of the biomass, which is insane. How many blue cats are in there, and they will eat everything humanly possibly can fit in their mouth. They will do it.
How do you eliminate them? How do you lower the numbers?
I don't think you can. Because I keep asking the state that question, and they're like, well, we got to catch as many as whatever. I was like, give me a mathematical number. Tell me how many tons we have to remove per week, per month, per year to make an impact. And they're like, I don't know, just get them out. Yeah. It's like,
well, I mean, look at what Kentucky did with the Asian carp on Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley. I mean, that, interestingly enough, that lake is almost coming back now as a smallmouth lake, and a lot of it is because of they basically hired fishermen to catch the Asian carp. I remember the last tournament I fished on Kentucky Lake, I think it was 2019, and you would just pull up to a point, and with my regular Humminbird Helix 10, you could tell they were Asian carp because they were so big, you could see the forked tail on the down scan. Like, it was unbelievable.
It was terrible. No, I agree with you. And it comes back to something that we talked about earlier. Is like, it's each fishery. If you have blue cats in your pond, we can drain and get rid of it. If you're on Kentucky Lake, that's 100,000 acres, you can do something. The bay is 200 million acres. Like, dude, like, and that's the issue, is it's a big ass estuary. That's how, and I had this question about how do you fix the striper? That's the ocean. Like, you can't stock the ocean with migratory species. I truly don't know how you fix the bay with that. I think what's going to happen with any species is there's a bell curve where over time it'll find its normal.
Right.
And that's all you can kind of hope for right now. It sucks. Don't transport fish. I mean, you look at the Alabama bass situation in Southern Virginia, where it'll legitimately kill the smallmouth population, and the smallmouth will be extinct in 10 years. If there's smallmouth in a spotted bass fishery, in like 10 to 15 years, there'll be no more smallmouth. Boom, they're gone.
So when you mean spotted, do you mean the Kentucky spot or the Alabama spot? Or does it not matter?
It's an acronym depending on where you are in the country. It's basically the Alabama bass gene strain. And what happens with that is, and I think, yeah, so what happens with this is they breed with the smallmouth. And what they do is they make a mule over time. And so if a spot or an Alabama breeds with a smallmouth, in 1 or 2 generations, you don't have a smallmouth anymore and it gets stunted. And so unlike a blue cat that just eats you, this thing will genetically make you go extinct over time. And they hunt and live in the exact same waters a smallmouth does. Clear water, like a river, the Upper Potomac, the Susquehanna, Lake Hartwell, places like that, they thrive. But Lake Murray doesn't have smallmouth. Lake Hartwell, Lake Lanier, they don't have smallmouth anymore. And that's another issue that you're seeing. That's because people transport fish because they don't understand that Lake Lanier is a freak. The blueback herring in there are so thick, and they're like 12 to 13 inches long. And those things can sit there and just put the feed bag on. Kerr doesn't have that kind of bait, and it's not as clear. You're not going to get those same kind of spots. You're going to have little stunted spots is what you're going to end up having. So it's such a science getting the cover, the genetics, and the forage right to get these super lakes. Like Smith Mountain Lake is probably one of the best largemouth lakes kind of in our area, where you could take your girlfriend out with a mag draft and she could skip a dock and probably catch a 4-pounder. But again, it's got banging cover. It doesn't move its water around like Kerr. It's got gizzard shad that are like 12 inches long, and it's got F1s in it. So it's the perfect storm.
And big smallmouth.
And dude, I think there's a 10-pound smallmouth in that place.
My PB smallmouth for a lot of years was on Smith Mountain. My PB largemouth still is on a stupid live target bait ball, believe it or not. It was like I can't remember. I think it was 888. I think was the total. But yeah, it's so when you say like the Southern Virginia, you're talking like Clater Lake, pretty much.
Clater Lake, Gaston, Philpott. I think Chesden has some of them in it. It's a weird. Anything that's clear, that's super clear. Think Lake Murray for your audience, not to get into the scientific terms, but anything that's super clear, like Lake Murray, Lake Hartwell, Kiowee down in South Carolina, those places will, if they get spots in them, the spots will run rapid. If it has salt water or a lot of vegetation, they don't do well. That's why Gunnersville doesn't have a good spot population. But the lake above and below Gunnersville, they have a great spotted bass population, is because of the hydrilla and the eelgrass. They do not like that kind of environment.
Interesting. Yeah, I used to fish Clater a lot, and like if you caught like 15 pounds on Clater, you were like, oh my god. Most of the time, if you caught 10 pounds on Clater, it was like, oh my god. But yeah, it's interesting. I used to, like I said, I used to fish down there all the time, and Clater was like, interestingly enough, because Virginia's weird, Clater was the furthest lake from us, but it was the quickest to get to because it was just off 81.
Yeah.
Like, to go to Smith Mountain from Lexington, Virginia was like 2.5 hours, but to get to Clater was like an hour and a half, even though it was 20 miles further. So
it sucks because I fished a lot of high school tournaments back in the day at Clater Lake, and it sucked. Like, it was a terrible fishery, and you could catch a billion 10-inchers. And it's just because of that gene that got in there and kind of wiped out a lot of the smallmouth. And it pushes the largemouth to the brink because it's such an aggressive feeder. And I had Steve Simmons on the show. The episode's available for my Patreon supporters now. It's going to drop in April. Who is Auburn University? He's the head fish guy for task force for the Alabama bass. And they did studies on Lake Norman as an example. And they said, like, if you look at it, the spot is predominant and the largemouth starting to come back, but the largemouth is segmented to certain areas. Shallow, weedy kind of stuff is generally what it prefers, because it has to compete with this highly aggressive schooling predator, which is kind of like the striper situation. The lakes that it does the best in, where you have this harmony, is where you have the blueback, because there's so much bait just there swimming around that everything can live in kind of harmony. If you don't have that, it makes it so hard for them to kind of compete and create a homeostasis.
right.
And I know your probably listeners are getting bored with all this stuff, but we talk about this on my show all the time because I'm a big smallmouth guy. I lived on the Shenandoah River. I now live in Hagerstown, Maryland. So I'm like 5 minutes from Big Slack, the Conococheague and the Upper Potomac. I love smallmouth. And if it gets in there, like, it's done ski. Like, there's nothing you can do except, I guess, just stock it indefinitely, because you can't win that kind of battle.
Right. You ever fished Conowingo before?
One time when I was younger, and that was like when it was like yucky. I want to go back so freaking bad because I've heard so many cool things.
Dude,
about
hit
it.
me. That's my favorite place to fish. Hit me up. Seriously, anytime you want to go up there, let me know because I love that place. I take my boat all the way up past the bridge, up in the rocks, and up in the no zones, and it's not as bad as you think, but it's a amazing fishery. Definitely hit me up. Seriously, if you ever want to go up there, man, I'll be happy to take you. But yeah, so I thought that the spotted bass, like the Alabama bass and the Kentucky bass, were different spotted bass. Like I thought the Kentucky spot was the one that you wanted, and the Alabama was like this. From what I was understanding, was like it was a spotted bass, but it only got to be 12 inches, and it screwed up the fishery. But if you had the Kentucky spot, you were okay. So I guess that's not the case.
It's the genetic. So there's two parts of the argument. So one is which one will get bigger. Yes, there's a strain of spotted bass that will get bigger. And if you put them in the habitat, genetics, the forage, out in California where it's eating kokanee salmon, you're going to get insane ones. But they don't have smallmouth in those places. And that's kind of the thing. Is like, in theory, yes, in a perfect world, you could build a place where you could have good ones. However, you won't have smallmouth anymore. And so that's like, if those things got into the St. Lawrence, in theory, if they can handle the cold, would you get 15-pound spots? Probably. Would you have the smallmouth anymore? Probably not. And so like, that's where I think, like, from a conservation standpoint, you need to understand, like, depending on where you put them, yeah, you could maybe get a Lake Lanier or whatever the lake is out in California, but you might be sacrificing everything else to get that. And that's where it's kind of such a weird thing to do and to deal with. But people, you can catch them. Like those lakes, man, you're never going to get skunked. You won't catch, a keeper, but you're not going to get skunked in those lakes.
Right. Rob Steiner has a good comment. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but he's asking why the weight limits on our Maryland's lower eastern shore, particularly Nanacoke and Wacomico, are so low, being that the winters are a little bit milder. There's tons of habitat if you've ever fished the eastern shore. Wood is everywhere, tons of pads. I guess, what's your take on that? I mean, because there's a lot of bait, too. One of the interesting theories I've heard on that is the tide swing, with it being so drastic, is the fish have bad spawns because where they lay their eggs could be out of the water with any given low tide.
Delaware River. I mean, let's just use that as a test case sample. Like, are you pulling 30-pound bags out of the Delaware?
No.
Like, and that place freaking, I don't know how, you poor people up there, I'm sorry. Like, you must be depressed. You have to fish that place all the time. That looks miserable to fish those kind of tide swings up there. And if I think he's correct. If you have highly aggressive tide swings, it makes it harder. And I think genetics are another part of it too. Like, they probably are, you have the stunted genetics there. The Sabine River, they did do some stocking to get some other young blood in there to make that better. Again, I think if you did F1 stocking of the Eastern Shore in a vacuum, it would help it. You just can't take those fish out and move them because depending on where you are in the saltwater, they might never come back.
Right. So
let's say in a perfect world, you said, yeah, I'll stock this place, but you can't have tournaments that go into there. You have a great fishery, but then you couldn't, like, it sucks because there's no perfect bullet, but that's the thing is, yeah, you could fix it, but then what'll happen when the Bassmaster Opens come?
Right.
And that sucks. It's a place I really want to either kayak or take my boat is the Eastern Shore to do snakehead, to do bass, even to going down further towards Chincoteague and Assateague, the trout fishing. And I'm talking more about the Chesapeake too. We are probably going to lose striper in the next 10 years because of whatever climate change is happening, but it's going to be replaced with redfish, trout, and tarpon. We're going to have a tarpon fish.
Tarpon?
They're starting to catch more and more tarpon in the lower bay because it's getting warmer, and there's shrimp now in the bay. They're starting to see. So if you project it out, when we have kids and grandkids, they're going to probably be catching 100-pound tarpon in the Chesapeake Bay if things keep going this way.
Wow, that's crazy.
That would be insane. Not that I want to see rockfish disappear, though.
No, and it's not that I want that to happen either. But it's also like the bay won't be dead; it'll be different if it happens.
Right.
I hope it doesn't. I think Canada is going to have a great striper population. If I had to bet on, I think if it has to do with the water temperatures, I think Vancouver and the St. Lawrence River probably will be the home of the striper, and then we're going to be like the Carolinas. If I had to put money on it, honestly, but that's still really cool fishing opportunities because we didn't have puppy drum and trout when I was a kid. Like it wasn't like it is now. Like it was just striper and blues and occasional cobia, things like that. Now kayaking is booming because you can just take your kayak out and smoke God knows how many puppy drum and trout and stuff, which is it's different, but it's there's fishing opportunities there in our area that weren't available when I was a kid.
That's an interesting point. So, like, when we get to that point, what's it going to be like in Florida? Like, is it just going to be too hot to catch fish in Florida at that point?
I think the snook population is going to be banging in there because I think snook really need a warm climate. The tarpon will be fine. Like all those Florida Keys species that you see, like in the Key West, they're going to be fine, barring some kind of major algae bloom or whatever's happening in Okeechobee right now, dumping God knows what pesticides into the mangroves. But whatever those Florida species are, they're going to start migrating up more, and that's what you're seeing, and that's what they're talking about with the tarpon, because the tarpon are kind of that weird canary in the coal mine where they do not handle cold at all. They do not like it, and to start seeing them start touching into the bay, it means that there's something going on with the water temperatures that's allowing them to do that. Plus, you're seeing shrimp. Shrimp aren't cold water species necessarily. They need that warmer water. And so shrimp runs into the bay. That's interesting. That's really interesting too. I don't know. It's exciting. It really is. I don't know. We have so many fishing opportunities. We didn't even touch on like, OC and going out all the way, 500 miles off and catching swordfish and stuff. There's so many fishing opportunities in this area.
I've never saltwater fished ever. I hear it's a blast. I've never had the opportunity to do it.
I'm scared to get sick on the boat.
The closest thing I've done to offshore fishing is in the middle of the flats, honestly. So,
what's the biggest striper you ever caught?
Couple of 40 inches,
25 or 30 pounds, maybe. I haven't targeted striper too much. I have some good friends on here that have caught 50 pounders and whatnot before, but I think my biggest one was it probably wasn't even 30. I'm gonna say 20 and 25 between it.
I caught a couple that were like me and my uncle used to go fishing in right at the mouth of the Gunpowder River at night when I was like in high school. And we'd catch a couple pushing 40, 45 inches, but that was no scale, so I have no idea how much they weighed. But that was always fun. You could throw a rattle trap all night, find a spot with a good tidal current, and catch them.
Dude, that's when you have one of those slam you on a bait caster. My God, I was pre-fishing for, I think it was the first college national championship at Lake Murray. And I kept getting broken off, and I didn't know why on my jerk bait. So I was fine, like whatever. So I tied on a jerk bait onto my flipping stick that had braid. It was like jerk, and it just the reel locked the hell up, and it ended up being like a 25-pound striper, and like a hook has been out on that thing. And if you are not used to that, dude, those things truck you hard.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Dude, throwing some freaking big walking baits on the top for them, or just like it sounds like an explosion going off when they hit it.
I heard that there's
you get up in the rapids right below Conowingo when they're running and just throw a freaking head and not even the hybrids.
Oh, you mean
dude.
the lower ones?
The lower.
Yeah.
You just get in one of those rapids, like run one of those head and super spooks across the eddy, just tack, 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 and then it's like 3 times of any bass explosion I've ever heard. Just and it could be a freaking 16-inch rockfish. It's just ridiculous how aggressive they are.
They hit so hard. And it's like somebody threw a concrete cinder block into the water when they hit. They just push so much freaking water, and they don't like slurp it. Dude, they kill it hard.
Back in the day when the rockfish population used to be so much more than what it is now, my grandfather was a river rat. He was a Susquehanna river rat. He ate, slept, breathed rockfish and the river. White perch, yellows, rockfish, the smallmouth out there. But at the heyday of the rockfish back in the day, I want to, whatever the 70s or 80s, you could throw a bottle cap with a hook on it and catch when they are frenzying, when they're eating, and they're some of the most aggressive eaters I have ever seen.
And that's something we really didn't mention earlier when we talked about the correlation of like stocking programs. So much of the money and the time and effort goes to the Chesapeake Bay for Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Like
big time.
Look at the
preserve
flag,
the Chesapeake.
Preserve the Chesapeake, and that's not like Texas or these other places where it is more about the freshwater places, and that's hard. I had a guest on 2 weeks ago. His episode's dropping. He was the head biologist for the Maryland program for the smallmouth reluctation. That's something that he mentioned. Like in different places, you can get colleges to help you out for the state to do these different little programs. So if you live in Missouri, you can get a university student to kind of help out with certain things, generally speaking. And in Maryland, it's hard because all those programs are geared towards salt water. You don't have that same ability here versus like Virginia Tech. They have freshwater programs, things of that ilk. So it's such a weird dichotomy here where you have the Chesapeake Bay, biggest estuary, I think, on the planet. But then you also have the Potomac River, which is one of the #1 bass destinations on the planet, followed up by the Chesapeake Upper Bay, which is another major destination. And I don't think they're ever prepared for that. Like thrown in their lap that, by the way, it's like you have a place that everyone wants to go bass fishing. When say they don't care is not the right term. They do care, but it's like it's a side note compared to the Chesapeake Bay.
Right. So, question about the Upper Potomac, where you talking about with these guys are catching these giant smallmouth. This is completely kayak territory, right? Like, there's no way you're dropping in a bass boat up here and catching these fish safely.
Bet.
So, if you're fishing from the falls, to Harper's Ferry, or the confluence of the Shenandoah to the Upper Potomac, you would have some balls on you if you want to try that. It is jet boat territory. It's kayak territory. I live on what they call Big Slack, which I think I'm dyslexic as hell. I think it's Dam 4, Dam 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically Big Slack and then Four Locks is what we call it. And then up past Four Locks is Hancock, Maryland. Those two places you can put your boat in. We actually have Thursday night tournaments starting the last week of June, going all the way through September on Big Slack.
That schedule
there,
right? I like that
Yep.
schedule. Why don't we freaking run? I like that.
That's
schedule.
our exact schedule with the Thursday nighters here. So,
dude, it's freaking awesome, and
it's great.
It's pretty. For Big Slack, if I put in and I run at 65 miles an hour, it takes me about 10 to 15 minutes to get to the end where I can no longer run my boat safely. To give you kind of an example for how big it is.
So it's like Conowingo, kind of, in a way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it's not terribly big, and unlike Conowingo, it's not like a mile wide. That's the issue. It's kind of narrow, but you can run all the way up there. You will probably catch about 150 smallmouth that are 10 inches long to cycle through to catch a keeper. And the bags at that time of year are probably 10 pounds to 12 pounds will probably get you a good check there. Again, is it the premier place for a big boat? No, but you can go there and you can catch a bunch. If you want to catch a big one, where they did the stocking primarily was from the confluence of Harper's Ferry all the way down to Brunswick and through to the break line. That was the main section of the Upper Potomac that they did their stocking. The last tournament they put on, because this is what they did, they followed basically the Texas program for this. They had fishing tournaments out of Brunswick, and they cherry picked the biggest females and males to go back to do their program.
And these are kayak tournaments, right?
Nope, these are jet boat tournaments.
Oh, jet boat. Okay, gotcha.
They did jet boat tournaments. I think they did 1 out of 4 locks, and then guys, this episode is going to drop I think this week, so we get more nerdy sciencey because it's him speaking, not me.
Let's go.
But what they did is like they just followed kind of the Texas template. We're gonna host a jet boat tournament. You guys bring back the fish. We'll pick the ones we want for breeding, and we'll go put them into our system and bring it back. And a side note, there's only 3 states in the United States that actually successfully do smallmouth breeding: South Carolina, Don't know how that happened, but that's South Carolina. Virginia now has it, and Maryland. Those are the 3 states that have been the most successful in breeding. They are like great white sharks. They're insanely hard to breed in captivity. Don't know why, but they are. They figured it out. And so they've been putting for the last 5 years smallmouth in this system. And the last 2 years, it took 22 to 23 pounds to win a jet boat tournament. Smallmouth only. That's the Potomac. And again, I get so much shit on my show for saying this. I am not saying it's better than the Susquehanna. What I am saying is you don't have to travel to the Susquehanna to catch a big bag.
No.
It's completely 2 different things. And that's what's so cool.
Now, when you're talking about the Susquehanna, are you talking about more northern Susquehanna? Or are you talking our area? Our area having a 20-pound bag of smallmouth in our area is tough. It's good fishing, but it's tough.
I'm talking about like this proper Susquehanna proper. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
smallmouth country.
Yeah, up north.
That area. And again, I think it comes down to like there's just more. The Susquehanna is so primed, kind of like Occoquan Reservoir, where you're gonna have so many fish that are like in that perfect. If you're a kayak angler, like that 20-inch range, that 18 to 20-inch range, you're gonna have 1,000 4-pounders, 5-pounders. But what's so weird about the Susquehanna, and I've been blessed. I've interviewed so many people that fish that place. You never have 7s or 8s there. The New River has had 8-pounders and 9-pounders out of that routinely. I really think the Upper Potomac, I hope, whether it is Harper's Ferry down or up near Paw Paw and Hancock.
My girlfriend made you a sandwich and not me one.
Yours is coming up.
Yeah, I'm getting hungry too looking at that. I think the Potomac at some point could have a giant 7-pounder come out of it. I really do. It's not just because of the stocking program. I think it's the right size where the Susky gets pounded. It has this average size of like 4 to 6 pounders, but there's sections of the Potomac where it is like the boonies. No one's fishing it. And you could get a giant there, which would be so freaking cool to actually see.
It could definitely happen.
Yeah.
I think one of those like absolute toad giants could happen around here.
I'll tell you what,
I really do. Like it's not like he's talking about the land of smallmouth, like up north more, and I'm kind of comparing it to like what we have here because a 20-pound bag of smallmouth here is.
It's not crazy, but I mean it's impressive.
It's impressive. It's difficult, but I do think one of those like monster smallmouths like that. There's 7, there's 8-pound small. I think they're around. Dude, I just don't think people catch them. They're smart. Yeah. They're smart.
Oh, they are.
It's a very pressured system, as we were talking about earlier, and they adapt with what is going on around them. And I just think that a lot of these big fish have just figured out what is what, and they just don't eat the same.
So a large smallmouth is like a wolf. It is, and a wolf is intelligent as shit. And is hard to see in the wild. It's so hard to see the alpha wolf because they're that intelligent. They will be seen when they want you to be seen. And I think of a big ass smallmouth. It's that guy knows what your live scope is. It's seen your Ned rig and tube about 7 times. It thinks it's cute, but you got to be kind of crafty to be able to make him commit.
At the same time, though, the live scope isn't new, but it's newish. So when the live scope just came out. You know what I'm trying to say? The fish are definitely starting to catch more onto the pings and everything of the live scope now. But when the live scope came out, I feel like we're still seeing a lot of these big bags be caught now. That just the same as when it came out. I feel like it has not changed too much, even though it's been out for
5 or 6
long
years.
now? 6 years? Yeah.
Because it's not going to be as hard hitting as like the umbrella rig because it's not a technique. Like in of itself, people want to say it's a technique. It's not like the A rig where
it's a skill set.
The A rig out, yeah. Like they see the A rig coming over their head, they can see what's going on. It's a pinging radar, and then you throw different baits in front of him. So the ping is going to alert him that something is off, but you can then throw a little minnow you can throw different baits to try to trick him. But we are seeing evolution now where you have to be further away. You're talking about pros. They want to have it set between 70 and 90. Some people say 90 to 150, which is why you need a bigger screen, is so you can see that shit.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting old and I have a 10-inch screen. I'm like, I get why you want a 20-inch now. I need glasses to see some of this stuff. When I crank it up to 120 feet, you can't see shit on a 10-inch. It's hard. So yeah, like, are they going to get pressured? Yeah. Is it going to be as quick as the whopper plopper boom and bust? I don't know. Time will tell, I guess.
Yeah, people forget how like ridiculously hot the whopper plopper was when it first came out.
Such a good bait.
Stupid.
So you were talking about that area between Dam 4 and 5 on the Upper Potomac. Is it marked well with Navionics? That's the biggest thing about Conowingo, it's not marked well to get up in the rocks. You just have to learn it. Like for someone that's never fished it, if I take my boat there, am I going to be able to know when it's safe to stop running or start running?
You won't see any water. That's a good indication.
Okay.
It goes from like deep water to riffles, basically. And honestly, I live like 5 minutes from it, so I can show it to you. If you ever want to come up this way to Big Slack, you have a lot of water you can go to. It backs up all the way to Williamsport, basically Williamsport, Maryland. So I would say if you know where the game reserve is of Butch Ward up there, that area is usually when you should stop and get off pad unless the water's a little bit high. But that gives you a couple miles that you can run back and forth. It is pure smallmouth. There's no largemouth in there. There's like 3. If you catch one, you basically win because it's like 5 pounds and you can't catch that kind of weight there. That section, you're not going to necessarily catch a 20-pound bag of smallmouth, but you can get your boat out there and catch smallmouth all day. I Demiki rig there every winter because Big Slack is about 25 feet down by the dam. So you can Demiki rig. And I learned a lot about Demiki rigging smallmouth there. If you go to Four Locks, which is the dam just above Big Slack, and that's below Hancock, Maryland, you can catch a decent bag there. There was, I'm going to butcher this, I think there was an 18 or 19-pound bag caught at the Early Bird this year. It was cold as shit. I forgot to put my boat plug in the night before, so I had to go to the gas station to buy de-icer and pour it down my bilge so I could actually put my plug in because it was that cold. A guy had a Skeeter boat, and he found one of those big freaking seams close to the boat ramp. Everyone else that had jet boats flew all the way up to Paw Paw. They drove like 2 hours to go get him. This dude sat there with a jig, and he caught like 18, 20-pound bag and won. In the wintertime, you can put your boat in there and you can catch a mega bag with a fiberglass boat because it's near the dam. Smallmouth are going to move towards deep water for wintering stuff. That's kind of typical. But in the summertime, once they leave and go upriver, yeah, you're kind of screwed tournament-wise. But there's just so few places in Maryland you can run a damn big engine, which sucks. And that's something I really hate, which I wish Occoquan and even Lock Raven or something like that does. Like, can I at least idle my big engine? Like,
right.
I'm not going to get on pad if you're worried about that, but can I at least, I bought the damn boat. I will pay you if you just let me put this thing in there to fish. I hate when they're like, you have to buy this boat and then this boat, and then we're going to change the rules. It's a pet peeve of mine with the government.
I think the reservoirs will have restrictions on these new electric motors coming out.
Yeah,
some of these guys running 25 miles an hour across a reservoir with an electric motor, they're gonna put limits on that eventually too.
Isn't it funny how they change the goalpost? It's like, we need electric because of this reason, and then they're going to change the reasoning. It's like, well, it's the wake. It's like, wasn't that the reason in the first place? You just did it because you didn't think we could do it with electric. Now that we've proven that we can get on pad, you're all bitchy now.
Right.
Again.
Yep.
Absolutely.
100%. Oh man, do you have any other questions for Tom?
Dude, we've read them all, man. It's been a great show. I learned a lot tonight, so we certainly, dude, we really, really appreciate you coming on. If you ever
I feel like you're like the Harry Potter of like bass fishing around here. You're like a bass fishing wizard. Just like know a lot of stuff that's going on around here, and it's pretty intense. It's wild. I like it.
Yeah, most people would consider that being on the spectrum, but in the fishing community, it just means you got a talent. So that's why
the coolest thing, what I really, really appreciate about this whole conversation that we've had tonight is we've had a lot of these talking points on the show before, and nobody's been able to put things into perspective or give these types of pointers. So, like, that's what I really appreciate the most out of this is, for you talking about salt and the bay and how that determines how fish move and where they don't go. And, I had no idea Maryland had a smallmouth stocking program. Like, none. Like, that's cool. Like, we don't ever have that level of detail when we argue about shit on this show. So we really, really appreciate it, man.
I know. Thank you so much. And that's what I really want to try to bring awareness to is no one knew about the smallmouth stocking program. And it sucks because, and this is something that really, when I started my show, and I didn't want to just be about jigs and baits, but the waters, people didn't want you to talk about them. You have to understand from a state perspective, if you don't talk about them, they don't give a shit. And if you came in and said, like, I'm going to put money into a lake, and then everyone says, don't tell your friend that this lake is good, their thought is, no one's fishing this place, I will stop caring and throwing money at it. If us as anglers have to talk about all of our waters at the same time, not just one, and promote all of them, because if we promote all of them, the government will have no choice but to go in to fix all of them. Right. But if we don't talk about any of them, they will be like, there's no point in spending money to fix anything because no one's fishing. But as anglers, we have this weird idea that we can't mention this place, we can't mention that place. But classic example of this is in Fredericksburg, Virginia. There's 3 reservoirs. There's Mooney, Hunting Run, and Nye. And what happens is Mooney right now is mega bag. 35 pounds are coming out of there. It's insane. And people are like all upset, like, there's too many people at Mooney. There's too many people at Mooney. It's like, is anyone fishing Nye? You're like, nah, that place isn't good. It's like, exactly. That place is good. Everyone's going there. And now Nye has a time to breathe and it's going to get better. In a couple of years, Nye's going to have massive bags. People are going to move over to Nye and Mooney's going to rest. That's how you need it to be, that people will move around and it'll give those people time to heal. But if we just talk about Lake Anna, that place will just be beaten like a 20-cent hooker and it will never heal. And none of these other places will have a chance to shine. And so what I would 100%. Tell the fishing community, you got to talk about all of them. And if you highlight them, you'll have the success stories like the James that gets media attention, and then people have to keep it healthy. But if you have a fishery that you try to keep private in the sense like no one's allowed to know about this, that's fine. But don't be shocked when then in 10 years when it's not doing good, you're like, why won't the government help me? Because you spent 20 years to make sure no one found out about it. So why would they give a shit either? And that's just such a weird thing as anglers, is it's finding that balance point of you want to protect it, but if nobody knows about it, if it ever needs help, no one's going to be there to help you. So.
Yeah, no, man, it's a really great point. And like I said, this is a little bit of a change of pace for us to get really down in the details. Usually we're just kind of shoot the breeze. Even when we have like, when we had David Fritz on and Matt Herron, I think the conversation was not super informal, but it was pretty informal. So this is definitely
a lot of good detail in that stuff. But this was very, very informative. A lot of good, deep detail in it. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy that you were able to come and join us, man. And anytime, if you ever want to fish up this way and don't feel like dragging your boat, you always got a spot with either of us, brother. So
I apologize for taking us off topic when we first got into it in the beginning. When we first get into it in the beginning, I'm all like typing and clicking and sharing and doing all this stuff, and then I tune in and I'm like,
Nah, dude, hey, I get it. Like when I do pre-recorded episodes and stuff just to make life work, we'll go on tangents for like an hour before, and it's like, shit, I should have hit record. That was good stuff.
Right.
Rabbit holes are sometimes awesome.
Rabbit holes are some good topics on here. We've had some really hilarious rabbit holes. I don't know if you we had an episode with a couple, maybe a few too many beers in it. Do you remember the one where we were talking about the monkeys?
What?
Exactly.
What?
I will show it to you, dude. I'm telling you right now.
But I don't.
I will show it to you after this. We went on a 5-minute rant about monkeys fighting people, and what? It was
Who do we have on the show that day?
It was me, you.
Did we have a guest?
Paul. No.
Oh, it was just us. Well, that's usually when. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was so much fun. And I went back, so I record everything on my Rode software system, and I'm like going down it, and I'm like, what is this unlabeled one? And I press it. and I start listening to it, and like somehow we just get into. Somebody says, "Do you think Dana White could take on a chimpanzee?"
I do remember this. I do remember this.
And we're just like, nah. Like Paul's like, "There's no way Dana White's taking on a chimpanzee. A chimpanzee's taking on like 2 or 3 UFC fighters at a time." And then we got into this argument about chimpanzees fighting people.
What about Conor McGregor on PCP in his prime?
Nah, chimpanzee would destroy him.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Dude, chimpanzees are so strong.
Yeah, but like...
I know that Conor McGregor looks like a chimpanzee, but he is not a chimpanzee.
Yeah, but like we're just chimpanzees that like can talk and build stuff. That's the only reason why we can even talk about fishing is because one day some caveman was like, if I put a sharp rock on the end of this stick, I can kill stuff. And I don't have to be bigger than it. I can just throw it at it.
Conor on roids was giant, but I'm just saying.
It was massive.
Yeah.
Can
Conor
monkeys
on roids.
swim? Maybe Michael Phelps could beat him. Monkeys can't swim, right? Like,
Michael Phelps could go all 5-minute rounds, no problem.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'd have a head anymore.
I do remember hearing about that chimps cannot swim.
I thought Joe Rogan said like they can't swim, and it's like, okay, that's a game changer then if you could find them in the water or near the water.
I don't know. Joe Rogan is another interesting topic there.
Yes.
Oh man, Tom, really appreciate you coming on the show tonight, man, and we would love to have you come back on again.
Yeah, if you ever want to, if you ever have anything that you want to discuss with us, we would be happy to come on one of your episodes or vice versa, man. Always welcome
100%.
here. We seriously really, really appreciate you coming on. This was a really awesome episode.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you guys so much. It's so fun to, I guess, be on the other end, the receiving end of this for a change. It's kind of refreshing, and I definitely need to have you on the show as well.
Yeah, man, we would love it. We would absolutely love it.
You let us know when. We're in for it.
Right on. Sounds like a plan.
All right, my man. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next round.
Yep. Thanks. You have a great weekend and happy Easter.
Yeah, happy Easter.
See you guys.
Bye.